and welcome to Monday Night in Prophecy. This is the January program for 2023. Things are happening around the world as always. This program exists for 19 years and so we continue to see, in fact, we see an increase in the things that are happening around the world. It looks like it's getting faster and faster and faster towards what the Bible describes at the end times and how it all will work up to the day of the rapture. My name is Reinhold Buxbaum and I'm glad you tuned in and we want to get started. But before we do, I just have a kind of a funny page here about eggs. And it says just 2 more payments and it's all mine. Talking about inflation. And really it's not funny because people are really in dire situations when it comes to what should we buy, because money is just not getting any more the stuff that we used to be able to get for it. Well, anyways, I want to quote Isaiah 46:10, which says, this is God speaking, and he says, I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times to what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand and I will do all that I please. And so God is saying to us, look, I'm going to tell you the end. I'm going to tell you what's ahead of you, what is still to come. Now why does God do that? So that we know what to expect. So that the future isn't just a total question mark. He has given us literally hundreds of biblical prophecies that tells us what is yet to come. And that's what we talk about. We take the Bible in one hand, we take the newspaper in the other hand, and we see what's happening around the world. As always, the first part is, what does the Bible teach? What I've done today is, in relation to what the Bible teaches, a little bit of history about the Jews. And so I want to just kind of zoom in on some of the verses, but I also want to zoom in on the Jewish tradition, because tradition is a huge part of the Jewish people. And many times they really don't have a reason for what they're doing. They just do it because it is tradition. There is a famous movie that is called The Fiddler on the Roof. And The Fiddler on the Roof movie is fictional, but it resonates with the sad truth of Jewish history. The story was borrowed from a beloved Yiddish storyteller, Sholem Aleichem, from 1859 to 1916. Who grew up in the shtetl in the Russian Empire and knew the sting of the anti-Semitism. He knew it. And that's, although it's a story, is exactly what happened in those days in Russia, or also in the Ukraine. This story of the Fiddler on the Roof plays in the Ukraine. And at some point, the Jews were kicked out. So I want to just show you a brief clip of The Fiddler on the Roof.
And how do we keep our balance? That I can tell you in one word. Tradition! 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 Because of our traditions, we've kept our balance for many, many years. Here in Anatevka, we have traditions for everything. How to sleep, how to eat, how to work, how to wear clothes. For instance, we always keep our heads covered and always wear a little prayer shawl. This shows our constant devotion to God. You may ask, how did this tradition get started? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Some people hate Jews. Many don't have a reason. They simply hate Jews for being Jews. As the psalmist wrote, "Those who hate me without a cause are more than the hairs of my head." That was Psalm 69, verse 4. Anti-Semitism has precipitated some of the most horrific atrocities in world history. Slavery, property confiscation, forced conversions, military crusades, libels, confinements, beatings, torture, persecution, and genocide all have dodged the footsteps of God's chosen people for millennia. And then a scattering of God's sheep, the Jews, happened throughout the ages. Just as the Bible predicts, or I better say prophesies. When God prophesies something, it's a sure thing. It's not maybe, no. It is always 100% true. And so through Moses, God warned his chosen people about the consequences of disobedience in Deuteronomy 28. And he says, "You shall be plucked from the land which you go to possess. Then the Lord will scatter you among the peoples, from one end of the earth to the other, and among those nations you shall find no rest, nor shall the sole of your foot have a resting place." As a result of the first Jewish war against the Romans in AD 66 to 73, 97,000 Jewish people were carried into captivity. During another failed revolt against Roman occupation in 132 to 135 AD, thousands were sold into slavery and dispersed throughout the Roman Empire. In the centuries that followed, Jewish people were expelled from cities and kingdoms throughout medieval Christian Europe, under quotation mark, Christian, including Germany, Austria, Hungary, the Papal States, and Italy. One such ill-famed expulsion resulted from the edict of English King Edward I of William Wallace Braveheart fame in 1290. Thousands were evicted from their homes and forbidden to return to England for almost 400 years. In 1394, King Charles VI expelled all Jews from France. The Alhambra decree by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, 1492, threw the Jews out of Spain, lock, stock and barrel, adding that any who remained would incur the penalty of death and the confiscation of all their possessions. And they had until August the 1st, which is the 9th of the Hebrew month Av, to comply. This expulsion dismembered the largest Jewish community in the world at that time. Everyone that was Jewish background had to leave. And then came Martin Luther. It wasn't only Catholics that advocated expelling the Jews. In 1543, Martin Luther, leader of the Protestant Reformation, wrote a 13-part booklet titled "On the Jews and Their Lies." It spewed such hatred of the Jewish people that it influenced the German perception of Jews for centuries to come and helped Adolf Hitler and the Nazis justify their final solution to the Jewish question. A euphemism of the annihilation of the European Jews. The Jews were kicked out, they were killed, and as you know, in the Holocaust, some 6 million Jews lost their lives. But then in Joel Chapter 3 verse 2, it says, I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And I will enter into judgment with them, their one account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. And so there's a promise, and that promise is that towards the end, I will start to gather the children of Israel and bring them back to their land. Ezekiel 34, for the Lord God says this, behold, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them, as a shepherd cares for his flock on a day when he is among his scattered sheep. So I will care for my sheep, and I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a cloudy and gloomy day. I will bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the countries and bring them to their own land. And I will feed them on the mountains of Israel, by the streams and all the inhabited places of the land. I myself will feed my flock, and myself will lead them to rest, declares the Lord God. So God makes it very clear that towards the end of the time, not only will he bring back the Jews, but he will take care of his flock. And that's wonderful news for the Jews. But they still need Jesus. Without Jesus, there is no hope, whether it's Gentile or Jew. And with this, we're going to start our new part for the last month of January.